Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Now On podcast and the first video session and the first interview. I'm very excited to welcome a really good friend and mentor and former client of mine, Debra Stevens, today. Debra, nice to see you.
Hey there.
Hi. Okay, so quick background on Debra. Debra is currently the Senior Vice President of Communications and Donor Relations for Honor Health Foundation. Prior to this, she served as Executive Director of Marketing with Arizona Care Network, Director of Marketing and Communications for Phoenix Children's Hospital, and Vice President for the Phoenix Suns from 91 to 2004. And honestly, those are just like that's just your highlight reel. Every time we talk, it seems like you envelop, oh yeah, I did this other incredible experience that didn't even make the top 5 or something. But it's pretty astounding, at least to me. But Debra, you and I have known each other since about 2011, and at the time I was super junior in my career. You were just serving as the director for Phoenix Children's Hospital,
Right.
Director of Marketing and Communications, and I was your primary strategist for your account when I was at my agency job. But I can honestly say that now I'm going to speak kind of directly to everybody else. Honestly, working with Debra firsthand, honestly, by every definition, Debra's a strategic leader, second to none of anybody I've met locally or nationally or anything like that, which is why I'm honored that you're actually my first guest. I'm starting so high that I'm very excited. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you, John.
So Debra, as you know, this podcast, what I've been trying to kind of unpack are the moments in my own life that I now recognize as really my pivot points, pivotal to the course of what I've done since and the outlook of my life here. So more importantly, though, I recognize that the moments that I actually rose to the challenge of being courageous and taking a stand for my family and my own career, and then also those times where maybe I wasn't quite as strong and kind of backed down. I just didn't have the courage built up yet at that point. So I kind of wanted to start there with you. And, I know you've listened to at least one episode here. So if you, not to put you on the spot, but kind of in your own life, can you identify maybe some key now on moments where you resolved a change, how you've reacted to, or how you've been approaching specific conflicts or situations, and did it so in an empowering way?
Well, sure. It's hard to think back to those pivotal moments, but I did give it some thought, and through my entire career, I've really built up my personal brand around getting it done. Like, you can count on me, come hell or high water, I will get it done, and I'll get it done with excellence. And that has always been what I expected of myself. And I trained my bosses to expect it of me. So most people would consider that a really positive thing, right? You can count on Debra, she'll get it done. It'll be excellent. But in all honesty, there were times in my career where I focused on getting it done to the detriment of other things in my life, like personal relationships or my kids even, which is terrible to say, but I'm willing to be honest today,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So this was a realization that has crystallized over time. But you know what? When we know better, we do better. And I've been working on that balance for quite a while now. So I can certainly think of times like at the Phoenix Suns, we were building the new downtown arena when I first got there, and the demands on our time at work were significant. We would work all day and then do events at night. And we did the big grand opening for multiple market segments. And that was a very challenging time, from a time management standpoint, and the fact that everything there happens in a spotlight because, it's professional sports and everything's very visible. And so I was very proud of how I over delivered, not just doing my job, but taking on other things that would help the culture or would be just an extra add-in that would be great for an event. But those things take time. And I definitely had one moment that I guess I would say is pivotal now. And that is while I was at the Suns, my husband and I were in the process of adopting our first child. And the day that we were scheduled to meet our birth mom, who had selected us to adopt her child that she was going to give birth to, was the exact same day as our big tip-off luncheon for the season. And so I had the whole event planned, but I handed it over to one of my employees who did a beautiful job of executing the plan. But that was one time where I really had to prioritize my
Sure.
needs and my family's needs first, and was able to do that. I'm also thinking about, if you recall, way back when the Phoenix Suns went to all the way to the finals, but
Yeah,
didn't quite
93.
make the championship.
Yeah.
92-93 season. We were preparing this parade under the radar in case we won, and then we didn't win in the end. But the community still wanted to celebrate this
Yeah.
incredible team, and that parade took place on I think it was my 10th anniversary, and I spent my 10th anniversary wedding anniversary in a hotel room with my intern because we had to be at the site so
Sure.
early the next morning
Oh,
to
sure.
produce this parade. So I can think of a lot of times where I took a back seat personally because the work was essential.
Sure.
And I would say I'll still do that when it's absolutely essential, but my definition of what is essential has evolved over time.
Sure. Yeah, and it sounds like in that first example you gave, you did a good job maybe of already starting to prepare. Like you had somebody there that you could count on to fulfill what you needed to get done, so that you didn't have to make the same sacrifice, or you didn't have to make, to not meet with your birth mother or anything like that. Correct. So I think
Yeah.
that sounds like forward-thinking planning, at least, so that you had that opportunity to make that happen. So
Well, at the very least, I was lucky to have wonderful teammates and people who were very willing to step up. It's just in some environments, and certainly in that environment, the requirements really took all of us to be on. But yeah, I
sure.
was very fortunate to have a great team I worked with there.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine going because yeah, what year did the Suns? So was it 91 when the Suns moved into America West Arena downtown?
Yeah, I started there in 91, and they opened the arena in 92. Mhm.
Wow, and then it was the 92-93 season that they were
Correct. Yeah.
were the Western Conference Finals champions.
Lots of
So
stuff happening that year.
there was no lag time. There was no, okay, they're gonna take a few years to warm up. So
Yeah.
that was
It
something else.
was a very spectacular time in the franchise history, and a lot of fun to be
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
Well, and then you even carried through to the latter years with Steve Nash, the Nash's comeback and his high-paced, high-octane D'Antoni years. So that's something else.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just digging through my closet and I had my '93 finals hat
Oh gosh, great.
when I was a kid. Yeah, so
Yeah.
'cause we were actually, my family and I had actually gone to the final game with the Supersonics, the Seattle Supersonics, which was the Western Conference Finals, and so
Yes.
uh, they were handing out the hats then because it was, now we're in the finals, so it's pretty
Yep.
cool. So yeah, I distinctly remember that year too. Although I definitely wasn't working the events for sure. So, well, awesome. That's always fascinating to hear that kind of stuff. So it sounds
Yeah.
like you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you can recall. It sounds like you touched on some of the moments where maybe you might have made maybe the wrong decision, or maybe it
Mhm.
it was a step back. Looking back, it sounds like the ones that you described, you evaluated and you really ultimately maybe made the right choice for that time, and you knew that maybe your anniversary in this instance. So what if it's another couple days later or something?
Yeah.
You do something next weekend. There's that. So you can evaluate that, but. What about can you look back and think of any times when you say you took a step and you maybe stepped out in these pivotal moments and it was not necessarily the right choice?
Well, I've been really fortunate in that every professional job that I've held, even the ones that were really challenging, gave me the opportunity to learn something important, to add to my skill set. And even if it wasn't the most positive environment or exactly what I wanted at the time, I definitely learned something from the experience. So I have to say, I'm been very pleased with my career path. I think my errors along the way have really been more about inaction rather than making a wrong decision. So I've tended to
Mm,
spend a long time at jobs, and I would say sometimes too long. So
sure.
13 seasons at the Phoenix Suns. I don't think that was too long necessarily because I had the opportunity to do had multiple roles along the way. I got promoted and had new
Sure.
scope of work and that sort of thing. So that, but each one gave me an opportunity to learn. I spent 11 years at the at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that
Yeah.
experience. But I do think that was probably a little bit too long to stay there, and I was in the same role, and I was really eager to be promoted, and it wasn't happening for me. And really, when you figure out that it's not happening, the mistake I made is I should have made a change sooner.
Mm, okay. Yeah, that is. I think I felt the same way. When I was at my first job ever. I was at my first job for about 7 years, which
It's a
I
long
don't know
time.
for a long time. It's a long
Yeah.
time for your first job, right? So that being said, the kind of the environment there. It was.
Hmm.
I think within those 7 years, I got maybe 5 different promotions.
Hmm.
So it was always kind of keeping you there. But I
Yeah.
realized, and agency jobs too. And jobs like that, they tend to be hard to think about, like your maybe what you meaning is or purpose or something else aside from just kind of you're just so distracted. One minute I'm working on your account for Phoenix Children's Hospital, the next minute I'm working on an auto repair company, the next minute I'm working on somebody who sells potato chips. And so you're just kind of like, the idea that you're like, oh, I need something diverse or different, I need to get out and have a different brand, is not there at all. You're usually
Right.
actually the people usually leave like I did and say, I'd love to just try and focus on one and have a
Right.
long-term success build. So but I think it's interesting that you say that, because I know for me personally, and something that I've touched on is that I was really wound up in the culture aspect.
Hmm.
And the culture was, you put in everything to this, and you give everything to
Hmm.
this job, and that's what makes you exceptional.
Hmm.
And you look down on the people who leave at 5 on the dot, or you look down on people who take all their vacation time. You look down on, and it's so I was one of those people. I was the one of the big culture guys there doing that kind of stuff, and that's, I
Uh,
think, the environment. But now I realize that those people had external priorities they were giving to. Most of them were the ones that had kids, and they wanted to go hang out with their
mhm.
kids before it got too late, because you have to drive an hour to get home. And
Yeah.
so I feel like it was, I fully understand what you're saying, is almost like not evaluating, or for me it was not thinking that external opportunities, and this is me being junior, I think, not thinking that external opportunities could be better than what I'm currently getting.
Mhm.
um, and so why would I leave if I'm kind of worried about the grass is greener concept, the grass isn't
Yeah.
always greener. And so I think that's a really interesting point. I like what you said about the inaction maybe being
Mhm.
the setback, or the
Mhm.
delay or something,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah, for
gain.
sure.
Um,
Mhm.
so in my last episode, and a couple episodes now, I'm just going on and on about it, I guess. But I did discuss the impact of losing my job, the job I got
Mhm.
after I left my agency job, in the short term and the long term, kind of how I felt about it.
Mhm.
And I can honestly say that I was lost for a while. Like, I didn't really know how this what this meant. Well,
Yeah.
I was exception. You and me working together, and I just remember it, like, it was always like we felt like we were just the best in our class, at least to me,
Mhm.
like you and me.
Mhm.
And then I felt like I was always that kind of top tier, and then I'd get fired from a job, and I lost is the best way to describe it. I didn't really know.
Mhm.
But one of those major turning points for me along the path was remembering how you approached losing your job,
Mhm.
just the year before, and kind of seeing you be very public about it and very open
Mhm.
about it, and how you approach it in general. So would you mind maybe kind of like walking through that experience and the emotions and thoughts that you had in the immediately after what happened,
Mhm.
and then the days following, and then kind of as you evolved, and maybe how you feel about it today?
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, as I mentioned, I've always worked to over deliver in my job, not only in work product, but really to be a net add to the culture of an organization. So I like taking on extra projects that expose me to different people and parts of the organization. And I always considered myself an essential worker, an essential part of the
Yeah.
team at Phoenix Children's. And I never, never, never dreamed that I would be expendable. So what happened was, I'd been working there 11 years, really enjoying the mission of the work and the work that I got to do, but having some dissatisfactions with certain areas of it. No job is perfect, even if it looks
Yeah.
like it from the outside, right?
Right.
Mm, excuse me.
Yeah.
So, I had a new boss. There had been a reorganization
Mhm.
above me, and this new boss and I had been having lots of meetings about how do we want marketing communications to look like in the future. So he and I have been meeting very frequently, and we didn't always see eye to eye on what that new look should be. So I'm sharing my opinions and bringing
Yeah.
forward research and noting best practices and providing that kind of background to my new boss who did not have a background in marketing communications. And
Oh, wow.
we just weren't really seeing eye to eye. So there was nothing terrible about it. We
Yeah.
weren't fighting or anything like that, but it wasn't clicking.
Yeah.
I started to kind of just consider the thought of potentially leaving, but hadn't excuse me, hadn't done a lot of work around that.
Mhm.
He asked me to come to a meeting at the main campus, so my office was in another part of the city, and I came, and it was to talk about some of these issues that we had been working on. And came to a room, and the VP of HR was sitting there, and it still didn't occur to me.
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was just it was a foreign concept to me. I've
Sure.
never been let go from a job. I've always been recruited to new jobs. I consider myself a very high performer. And in
Yeah.
fact, the results bear that out. So I was completely shocked. So in the moment, I thought I did quite well. I asked the right questions. He said, "We've decided to make some changes, and they don't include you." That it was as simple as that. One sentence. He did say to me, and this is kind of the thing I held on to for a long time, was
Sure.
it's nothing you've done or you didn't do. We've just made the decision to go a different direction. So he left to go have a similar conversation with a colleague. I wasn't the only person let go that day, but I spent the next 20 minutes going over just the separation details with the HR lead. I've always been really calm in a crisis, and that served me well in this
Sure.
particular situation. So, like I said, I listened. I asked a lot of questions, took the paperwork home, was making notes. Um, I wasn't permitted to go back to my office. All my personal
Right.
belongings were there, including my lunch for that day, which I didn't really want to have sitting around in an
Oh,
office for
ridiculous.
several days, right? But they told me we'll box it all up and have it sent to your home. So there is no way around it. Being fired sucks, right?
Yeah, right?
It's a complete blow to your ego especially when you're not expecting it. I wrap up so much of my personal identity in my job position, probably to a fault. So then, like, who are you if you're not the director of marketing communications for Phoenix Children's Hospital when
Right.
I had spent 11 years building that as, my brand? 11 years of complete dedication, building a terrific team, exceeding my goals, and really having a personal investment in the mission. All that was just yanked out from under me, right?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
when you allow yourself to be defined by your job, losing your job can absolutely mess with your self confidence. And I definitely had those moments. But I very quickly learned that there were some positive things as well. So um, during this week, my son had a surgery on this that same son that I adopted.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's an adult now. He was having ACL replacement surgery on his knee, and I was balancing helping him because he lived in an apartment with stairs, so he had moved in with us for his recovery time frame. So I had balanced, taking half a morning off to run him down to the surgery center and then get him back set up at our house and then going back to work. And so life was pretty frantic right then of trying to help him and still keep the job moving forward, as was my commitment. So all of a sudden, I didn't have to worry about balancing all that. I was home for him.
Sure.
So he was about 4 or 5 days post surgery. So we started the very next day after I lost my job. We went on a breakfast tour. So every day we went out to breakfast someplace different, and we just
Oh, that's great.
talked, and I got to know him as an adult better. And I would say that was probably the most beautiful thing about having this sudden, unexpected gift of time. So
Sure.
I was a little panicked about losing my job, of course, not just from the ego part, but the self-worth, and then
Yeah.
of course a paycheck. But I
Right.
have to say, Phoenix Children's was very fair to me in our separation, and my separation benefits were just exactly what they should have been given my 11 years there. So as I was kind of panicking about, like, what am I going to do? I have to get a job. I got to get a paycheck. My son said to me, "Mom, nothing has changed. Like, if I
Yeah.
can't have my PTO and I'm still being paid for a period of time, I was fine." It was
Yeah.
a false panic. And so having to think about the reality of it, the reality was it wasn't as bad as I thought it was,
Sure.
even though, it feels bad at the time. But I had this gift of time to just decompress and think and build relationships and read and do things around the house. And so I took care of those things too.
Sure. Yeah, no, my wife said the same thing to me too. I had a severance arrangement
Hmm.
with my job, and it was fair. I had only been there for a little over a year and a half,
Hmm.
but it was still, I thought, generous for that.
Hmm.
And then, a few months later, my wife ended up her company gets relocated to Austin,
Oh,
so she had to make a choice of go to Austin or just or let us terminate our arrangement eventually. She got notified in December and they were out in March.
mm,
And so she had time to think it through and kind of go all through that. But similarly, like it was, uh, she had the same moment when I lost mine in saying that, well, for X amount of time, for as long as you've been given your severance,
yeah,
nothing changes. So
nothing has
really,
changed.
we
Yes.
haven't felt the financial impact of this, nor will we for this much time.
Yeah.
And then when she lost her job, the running joke was, "Gosh, we've never been paid so much to not work. we got paid. We just got such a good payout to not work anymore. This is fantastic." So it's kind of maybe a sign that's like maybe you need to take this from a different perspective of
Right, right.
enjoy the time. And yeah, the unexpected gift of time. I remember for me, I think that day had redone my resume was updated and I was
Hmm.
looking at jobs to send out the
Yeah.
same day that I lost it. It was just
Oh
a matter
gosh,
of
yeah.
like, no, 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 no. I'm doing this because I was a remote worker. So there was no packing up.
Oh yeah.
There was no driving home. There's no nothing. I was just, you're done. And so then I'm home already and it's over. Uh,
Wow. Yeah.
it's an interesting feeling to just not have that extension there anymore. But yeah, I did the same thing. Well, I did the inverse of just I should have taken. Looking back, I should have taken some time to breathe
Hmm.
and realize that what is currently true versus what my fear is of not having. Losing half of our income, and now
Hmm.
what do we do? And we're in this tailspin. I did crazy things, like even thinking about, oh no, are we going to have to go on like unemployment and welfare and all this other stuff, and it was just like it was a total pivot of my thought, but it was completely that I had everything kind of crumbled, right? I thought later on, I was like, that it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You
Yeah.
have your pyramid, and we were way at the top where it's like we're just worried about the craft beer we're drinking this weekend or something, and then all of a sudden the whole pyramid crumbles, and I'm just like, in reality, that's what I thought happened, but in reality, it was all still there. It's just this is a change,
Mhm.
and time to reprioritize, refocus. And so,
Right, right.
and then what's crazy is I haven't talked about this on my podcast yet, but so it took about maybe about 6 to 8 months to find a new job.
Mhm.
Um, for me. And I remember when I accepted it, I felt worse because I
Mm.
was like, I don't think that I took I think I basically took the first job that had a firm offer to it. It didn't seem that exciting to me. It's not an area of passion of mine. And I lose a lot. I have to go into the office now, which I really started enjoying the work from home time.
Yeah.
I have to do all these things. And so I remember thinking, man, this is worse than actually getting cut. Not saying that the job is a bad gig and that the people are
Yeah.
bad or the structure is bad, but it's not what I wanted, and I took it. So that self-worth just carries through, and it kind of like makes it really hard for you to do anything. So I
Sure.
can
Yeah.
understand. So one of the things that I really admired about what you did though was you were very public about it.
Mhm.
I remember you talked that you were just going to have lunch with whoever you wanted to. You're going to have lunch with mentors you hadn't seen in a while.
Yep.
What was that switch for you? Because most people like me, I was completely silent on any channel for about a full month. Nothing.
Mm.
No pictures of my kids. No nothing. I'm in this dark mourning period. But you were. I felt. I knew it wasn't the same day, obviously. But you were very quick to just
Mhm.
very open.
Yep.
Say this is what happened. But like for me, even in my interviews for subsequent jobs too, it was. Oh, we decided to go different directions, and I was, they were making cutbacks or some honest. And I remember my last interview was like he asked 7 times, like, but who initiated this? And I'm like, they
Oh.
they did. They initiated the separation. So it's like I was trying to do all the massaging,
Oh
but
man, it's gonna make you say it.
I know, but I wasn't there yet. I didn't have the courage to just say, yeah,
Yeah.
it's over. So, but what was that?
Mm.
Why did you decide to be very public with it, and what did that do for you, kind of?
Mm. Well, there's a couple of reasons I decided to do it. One is by nature, I'm a really open person, and I have a large network of friends and colleagues and coworkers and former coworkers. So I think part of it is my natural tendency. The second is in the position that I was in, I was the representative of the hospital to a lot of different organizations and people, and people were going to find out, right? So, I mean, I just, it didn't really occur to me to not talk about it, I guess. And
Hmm.
it was only later when I had the opportunity to chat with people who were going through the same thing that I realized that there are actually people like you just described
Yeah,
yourself, where
yeah,
you want to hide and not talk about it. So it didn't really occur to me because it's just not my nature. Now I didn't do it the same day, that's for sure. I was my brain was cycling just like you described, where I was
mhm,
feeling really down on myself and then feeling very hopeful or angry, all these denial, whatever, I went through all the
sure,
stages, right?
yeah,
But, it may be your every instinct to retreat, lick your wounds, regroup. I felt like it was far better to let everyone know.
sure,
So I spent significant time crafting a very appropriate Facebook post, which is where I was most active, and with no blame, no negativity. I love Phoenix Children's, the organization, even though I didn't love that I was let go, right? Um, I was reorged out, right?
right.
I hate saying fired. I really don't like it.
I
But I
know.
was reorged out. But I crafted this
Yeah, you
message.
you either have fired or terminated, and both just sound horrible,
Neither
right?
one is good.
Come on.
They both sound deadly. But so I wrote this message, and the outpouring of kindness and encouragement and good thoughts for me and positive things about me that people had never said to me, but they apparently felt about me.
Sure,
It was the best medicine. Like, just to read those comments, it made me feel so good that people were just feeling so positive about me and willing to reach out and write it down, to that, knowing that I would see it. So that was my first realization, like how many friends and colleagues in this community were on my side. It made me feel great, and it made me feel hopeful and positive. Um, I did something similar on LinkedIn where I have just my, more distant or only professional life
Sure.
contacts. And of course, invited them to send me anything that they felt I would be appropriate for, or to connect me with people. And boy, did my network deliver! Like it was immediate. So I I'm really a proponent of being open about it, because if you think about, if you have to look for a job while you still have a job, you've got to keep it under the radar, right? You've got to be quiet and careful and tell everybody it's confidential, but you're taking a risk because who knows who tells who. When you've lost your job, you can tell everybody, and that's a
Sure.
positive, right? Because then you can tell the world that you're looking, and people who might never have thought about me for a job that they have open because they thought I was so happy at my prior job might never have contacted me
Sure.
if
Yeah.
if this hadn't happened. So it can be a positive in that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, actually there were two things because I was thinking about it too, and the difference here, and one of the things that I thought was, I wonder that because I was starting to in my head I was like, I wonder what Deborah would say to these things. I wonder what she would say to these questions. But this I thought was interesting thought that I had too. You're such a good, you know, publicist, and such a good, story brand person, that it was almost like, from my perspective, if you're silent, and this happens to you, we can all fill in the narrative for you. We can all
Hmm.
say, you know, she's probably really bummed. She's probably like devastated in this front. She's probably really upset that these things happen. Um, and oh, poor Debra, and all the stuff and all that comes to you. And it's like, that they're thinking it, and now they're thinking, it's just like the self-fulfilling prophecy kind of. But you being very open about it and very clear and saying this is what happened. You, like you said, the response wasn't any kind of pity or sorry this happened to you or anything like that. It was, oh my gosh, you're fantastic. You'll land somewhere so great. And here's all the people I can think of that'll
Hmm.
help you and all this. So I think that it was such a good way to own what happens to you and take
Hmm.
control of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you created your own power. And then power was the second thing I thought, because like you said, when you are working for someone, and you're working for, and you have to hide it all. Kind of the employer always has the power. Like, you're always kind of, you're applying behind the scenes, and you're getting the interviews with them, and they're sitting with you, and they're deciding on whether or not you're a fit for them. And so I feel like they always have this kind of powerful position to you. But you made yourself very open, that you're kind of on the market, so to speak. Like, I'm
Hmm.
here, and everybody floods you with recommendations. Suddenly, it's like, I feel like you created a really good almost competition for you, and the shift becomes different. I don't know if that's actually what happened, but but like you said, you don't have that opportunity when you're the one sending out resumes to a dozen places, and like me, 100 places, desperately hoping one of them calls you back and doing all this stuff. Clearly, I have no power in this argument, in this situation, and they have all the power. Whereas you being somebody who reached out to her network, and were very open about it, you
Hmm.
retain that power and that kind of stuff. So I at least those are that's what I felt from being an outsider too.
Oh, okay. All right.
So anyway, and you kind of passed along. So like you mentioned, you had colleagues that were also let go, and
Hmm.
you passed along some advice to them once this happened to them.
Hmm.
What was it? Was it essentially what we're talking about now?
Yeah, so I did have one colleague who was let go the same day I was, and although they told me, because he was on my team, that he was also being let go, apparently they didn't tell him that I was being let go. So when he left for the day, with the same weight on his shoulders that I left under, he thought he was the only one, and so it
Mm.
was a couple of days before we kind of connected with one another, and I just wanted to reach out to him and say, you've been a terrific employee. I so appreciate the many contributions you've made, and I'm sorry this happened to you. And you know, and then I found out that he didn't know that I had been let go too. So it was just
Oh,
a very strange thing. And he and I are very different people, so we took different approaches. But he really didn't want to be open about it. And that's okay. Everybody has to do what they're comfortable with. But in a subsequent situation, even more than a year later, a very dear friend and former employee lost his job there also. They were just continuing the reorg over time. And the conversation he and I had was very much what we're talking about now. I just told him, here's what I experienced. It may not be perfect for everyone, but I found that by telling everyone that I had so many more opportunities coming my way because people knew I was looking. And and plus just the level of encouragement that you get, because people think highly of you. And this gives them an awesome opportunity to share that at a time when you need it most, when you need some self-affirming words to come your way.
Right. Yeah, no, it's fantastic advice. And now I work for myself. So if I get fired, then I'm in a lot of trouble. But
oh, you have a great boss then.
I do, right? Yeah. He can be a good one and a bad one at the same day. But I think that advice is excellent to follow. So this is more of a high level point or question here, but you've always struck me as a very confident person, incredibly confident person. But I assume at some point every now and again, and you've mentioned, the immediacy of losing your job and things like that, but you obviously have self-doubts because you're
I'm human.
Right. Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
So how do you manage them? This is more of a lifestyle kind of question, but how do you handle them, and how do you not let the setbacks and mistakes make you question your value and what you bring to the table?
Well, it's a good question, because it's hard for someone who puts so much value in their professional role as I have done, and then to not have that professional role anymore. So yes, absolutely, it leads to self-doubt. And I think there's a few things I do. One is I've always kept a folder of kind notes that have been written. And I actually got this habit from one of my very first bosses in an agency. And he had a little folder of just things that people had sent him. And I started keeping that. I think I still have the very first one somewhere in a folder here, but kind notes that bosses have sent, or clients or coworkers. And so for the first thing I did was really continue to reread those hundreds of notes of encouragement that I got from my network of former coworkers and industry colleagues and friends. When you're feeling down, it just fills you up to read those kind and positive words. So I think that's one. Another is to think about what next. So one of the things that I made the assumption that one of the reasons that Phoenix Children's didn't want to keep me there, even though they didn't really give me any reason, was that I was too much of a traditionalist in marketing and communications and not digital forward enough. So darn it, I went back to school. I went to the Cronkite School, got my digital audience strategy graduate certificate program. I just graduated in May. It was about a year program, and added to my skill set and broadened the opportunities that I have available to me because of that skill set. So take that. That felt pretty good, right?
Right. That's awesome.
And add to my own skill set. A really important one I'll mention is to tell myself the truth, right? So I hadn't been truly fulfilled in that role for at least a year. There were some negatives about it that I felt like it might be time to go. So I'd already been at kind of casually looking, very under the radar, as we talked about. But when that restriction lifted, it was like that was a weight off my shoulders. I no longer had to figure out how to be happy in a job I was actually somewhat unhappy in, but hard to leave because it's such a great organization. I love the organization so much.
Sure.
So with the payout of a significant PTO bank I had, and also that separation package, the severance from PCH, I had the time to think about what I wanted to do next. And I wasn't forced to rush into something because I had to pay bills. And so I thought a lot about what is the kind of organization I want to work for. Yeah. And I distilled it down to a few things. One, it had to be a mission I believe in, not necessarily a nonprofit, but I had to believe in what I was doing. There had to be a really positive culture, and there had to be a good match between my skill set and what they needed. And if I could find those three things, I would have a great opportunity in front of me. So I started looking for that and sharing that personal insight with the people who started to send me open positions that they had heard about, because then it's like, well, is this right for her? What, is it what she's looking
Sure.
for? The other thing that happened during that time, I had an uncle who I was somewhat close to, passed away during this time, and I would say, I'm much closer to my aunt, who was my uncle by marriage, and I probably would not have gone out of state for his funeral had I been working. This
Mm,
gave me the freedom to go, to be with my family, to not have to rush through or worry about what was happening. So I had to recognize that there were gifts in this free time as well.
sure.
So I guess another thing I've learned is, maybe this is a little more on the practical side, but
Yeah.
beware of the rabbit hole of Indeed.com or any other,
Right.
online search tool. One of the benefits that Phoenix Children's gave me when I left was a membership in a very good outplacement firm, and I worked with them as part of those separation benefits. And they told me something that I never really thought about. They said applying online, doing that only makes you feel like you're doing something, but you're not really accomplishing anything. It's like,
Mm,
and think about how much time it takes to fill out all of those different styles of online
yeah,
job
sure.
postings, and you have to, at least I felt like I needed to craft my resume a little bit differently, adjust it, and
Yep.
focus on different things for each one. So it could take hours. So I felt very productive. I was spending, 6 hours, 7 hours every
Yeah.
day doing something to find a job. But what was actually happening? I got to tell you, I applied for one job in California that I actually got the no thank you letter 14 months after I
Oh, I
applied.
know. Isn't it? Oh my gosh.
It's just amazing. So like I say, you feel like you're doing something, but you're not really accomplishing anything. So what I found out is that after about 2 months of getting leads in from my colleagues and applying for those jobs and talking with people casually, and then them calling about positions, I had 5 prospective roles. Now I didn't have 5 offers. I don't I don't want to say
Yeah.
that, but I had 5 prospective roles that were moving forward in a positive way. Out of those 5, 4 of those jobs were never posted in a public forum.
Oh wow.
They were leads from my network. And so that can feel risky, and it might feel like you're not doing anything if you're not applying online on
Sure.
Indeed.com or whatever. But
Sure.
I found it much better to work that network. So
Mm.
yeah, so
Wow.
those are my learnings.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I know. The mantra that everyone tells you is, well, now your full time job is finding a job, right? That's
Mhm.
what they say. You have to flip that mode. But like you said, like there's a balance between, well, one, there's a smart way to do it, which you're explaining is not the way that everybody tells you to do it, which is find the jobs that they're posting for or something. And then there's just the amount of time, like you said, that it takes to actually appropriately apply
Mhm.
somewhere is extensive. And yeah, you end up being, I have a whole Google Drive folder full of
Yes.
customized customized cover letters and all this
Yes.
stuff for jobs that never even came anywhere. And so I think, yeah, there's definitely something to be learned from one, and
Mhm.
appreciating the time that you have. If it doesn't put you in a desperate situation to not have your uh, well, one, maybe even before that, set your house in order to make sure that if something were to happen,
Sure.
don't put yourself in a situation. We find, my wife and I have been big on saving for those emergencies and the emergency planning, so we have a nice cash reserve in case anything
Yeah.
were to crumble. Because losing both of us losing our jobs within a 6 month period will get you to prepare.
Yeah,
so,
I would imagine so. Yeah.
so we're nicely prepared now,
Yeah.
and so if something were to happen, but yeah, it gives you the time, gives you that freedom, and it allows you to appreciate the time that you have to actually find a
Mhm.
good job and not take really
Mhm.
the first thing that comes your way. And for me, I think that's a setback that I've learned from almost. exactly immediately. I learned from that, wow, this did not feel good. This is not how
Yeah.
accepting a job offer should feel. And it was an immediate thing. And so I rectified it fairly quickly. But I think that, I had to learn the hard way this time, but that's okay. Every once in a while. Well, Deborah, that's all for my questions. I really appreciate you joining the Now On podcast and me. It
Mhm.
was really always great to talk to you again. I feel like every time we
Thank
get
you.
together for coffee or something, there's always some really cool, inspiring, exciting conversations and critical conversations of
Mhm.
how the whole process works. And I appreciate you being so candid about your experience because, like you said, for every one there is of you, there's got to be probably 100 or thousands of, especially now, given the unemployment, the
Mhm.
rampant unemployment that we just saw. There's millions, literally millions of people who are devastated and silent and not as
Mhm.
outward as you. And so you set a good example for how to use a network, how to use a network to
Sure.
get you
Yeah.
something fulfilling and kind of control your own story, which I think is what I'm learning more and more is really
Mhm.
the helpful along the way for a number of fronts. So again,
And
thank
for
you.
those of us who are survivors of this
Yeah,
experience,
right.
I would just say reach out to people who are experiencing it now. I sent a note via LinkedIn to a friend I found just lost her job because of COVID. And I just wanted her to know I saw that this happened. I'm so sorry. It's terrible that this is happening to so many talented people. And you're going to be great. You're going to be great. And
Sure.
so, people did that for me. Now I want to pay it forward and let
Reciprocate it.
people who
Yeah.
are in that situation know it's going to be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great that you say things like that too, because one post I saw on LinkedIn not too long ago was saying, yes, there are a plethora of new candidates available. Yes, there are candidates that would not have been available had it not
Yeah.
been COVID-19. Know that that does not mean you can underpay them and give
Right.
them a worse job because they're desperate. And I think it's important for the candidates to realize that too, that just because you're in this situation, you don't start devaluing yourself, because it won't make you satisfied, and it'll make the firing bigger than it really was. It'll make the
Yeah, that's true.
termination or whatever, it'll make the end of that point, it'll makes it so much worse than it actually was, because it's really just a pivot point and something you could actually build on. So I really appreciate it. Thank you
Mhm.
again. And for everyone, I'll do my little plug at the end here. But everyone, if you're interested in learning more about the Now On podcast, and want to listen to past episodes, please go to nowonpodcast.com. We're on Anchor FM, anchor.fm/Now On Podcast. They'll redirect to the same thing, so you can do whatever you wish. And we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a lot of other places where you listen to podcasts. So thank you again, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.